8 enlightening books. I haven't read all of them, but the ones I have read, I love. In particular, Stealing Fire. He's also an expert on performance, peak experiences, and flow states, and he just finished a wonderful cyberpunk book called Last Tango in Cyberspace. Are you feeling stuck? Got some writer's block? Wondering why, when you were in Chile, someone wearing a Pokemon shirt tongue-kissed you? Then this is the DTFH for you. Robinhood is an investing app that lets you buy and sell stocks, ETFs, options, and cryptos, all commission-free. While other brokerages charge up to $10 for every trade, Robinhood doesn't charge any commission fees, so you could trade stocks and keep all of your profits. Plus, there's no account minimum deposit needed to get started, so you can start investing at any level. The simple, intuitive design of Robinhood makes investing easy for newcomers and experts alike. View easy-to-understand charts and market data and place a trade in just 4 taps on your smartphone. You can also view stock collections, such as 100 most popular. With Robinhood, you can learn how to invest in the market as you build your portfolio, discover new stocks, track your favorite companies, and get custom notifications for price movements so you never miss the right moment to invest. Robinhood is giving listeners of the Duncan Trussell Family Hour a free stock, like Apple, Ford, or Sprint, to help you build your portfolio. Sign up at duncan.robinhood.com. I can tell from the look on your face that a sex clown we've been missing. I'm not from the circus, baby, but I'm open to fisting, to fisting. Gonna help you find your soul again. And if you're tired of fisting, if you get tired, you can always go back to it. Go back to your sex cloud, to your sex cloud. Wow. That is Go Back to Your Sex Clown by the Pixley Brothers from Utah. Dear darlings, do you like the Duncan Trussell Family Hour podcast, but are you sick of the commercials? All you got to do is go to patreon.com/DTFH and you will get episodes uninterrupted by the horror of consumerism. Not only that, but you will find a variety of stuff over at the Patreon that is never going to be on the main feed, including once a month, an hour-long rant. It's all there for you. All you got to do is go to patreon.com/DTFH. We also have a wonderful shop at DuncanTrussell.com with all kinds of beautiful thises and that's, including a wonderful Stop Drinking Crow's Milk bumper sticker. It's all there for you at DuncanTrussell.com, which, by the way, was created using Squarespace. Want to make a beautiful website in less than an hour? You could do that at squarespace.com. Want to create a nuanced, glorious website of such deep and intense complexity that it puts you on the radar of a secret government organization that comes to your house and offers you millions of dollars just to interview you? Happened to me. Go no further than Squarespace. They've got everything you need to create a beautiful website. You want to sell your socks online? I know someone who does that. You can do it with a Squarespace website. Want to create a beautiful podcast website? Check out DuncanTrussell.com. I use Squarespace every time I upload an episode of the DTFH. Go to squarespace.com/Duncan and start your free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use offer code Duncan to get 10% off your first order of a website or a domain. Much thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this episode of the DTFH. Now, without further ado, everyone, please welcome back to the Duncan Trussell Family Hour podcast, one of my favorite humans living on this planet. He just wrote an amazing cyberpunk novel called Last Tango in Cyberspace. He is also a brilliant person who has written many other books that I've enjoyed, including Stealing Fire. You should definitely check that out. And he's also an expert on flow states. Now, everybody, please welcome to the Duncan Trussell Family Hour podcast, the great Stephen Kotler.
I just have to tell you another story first.
Okay.
I live in the middle of nowhere. And as you know, middle of nowhere, technology doesn't work exactly the way it works for most people. So my Siri, which is a voice activation, thing, it took forever for that to actually get set up. And it finally came online last week. I've had my fucking iPhone for 5 years, but finally the voice activation software kicks in and I can have conversations.
Cool.
And I realized this and I'm like, holy crap. I can ask Siri questions like all over the place. I gotta be like, hey Siri, know any good jokes? And so I did this.
Yes.
Right. And mind you, at the time I'm doing this, I'm writing this new book with Peter Diamandis, talking about the dangers of AI, questions about all this stuff is on my consciousness. Hey Siri, know any good jokes? This is what Siri says to me. Bartender says, we don't serve time travelers in here. So a time traveler walks into a bar.
Shit, man. It's fucking with us.
I know. That's what I'm saying. The Matrix is winking.
Yeah, it's really starting to wake up. And there's gonna be a mischievous period, that's for sure.
Oh my God. I was like, oh my God, I am totally being fucked with by a conscious AI. This is so good.
You especially, man. I mean, you've got to be on not just human radars, but on AI radars. You're so out there, and what you're talking about is probably somewhat influencing the development of these things. For real.
Maybe. A little.
Okay, well, welcome back to the DTFH, Stephen. Thank you so much. I've been really looking forward to this conversation. And here's some flattery real quick. Of all my guests, man, I think about the stuff we've talked about the most, I think. Like, you pop into my head all the time.
That's so nice.
Well, thank you. And thank you for writing this book. This is so right up my alley, man.
I knew it was. I knew it would be.
Yeah.
I totally knew you were going to dig it.
But so I just want to start off, man, on page 102 of this book. Somehow, you just tuned in to so many of my favorite things. And I was wondering do you have the book in front of you?
Yeah, I've got it to 102. So where do you want me to start?
It starts with Last Tango in Cyberspace, says Lorenzo. Yeah. Okay. And then if you don't mind, just end on the lion finishes the stanza with that awesome Muad'Dib quote.
Got it. All right. This is the first time I've done a reading from Last Tango. The very first reading. Here we go.
Awesome.
Page 102. Last Tango in Cyberspace, says Lorenzo. I don't know that phrase. Cyberspace, the noosphere of the internet. William Gibson called it a shared consensual hallucination. Shared being the critical part. No sharing, no communication. No communication, no cooperation. No cooperation, no empathy. Game over. An AI that makes sharing information impossible. As an M-tracker, you should get this. Last Tango in Cyberspace, says Lion. The end of something radically new. Copy that. Lion, by the way, is the protagonist. An open-air bus passes by the bench. Japanese tourists wearing wireless headphones and VR glasses with opaque lenses. Their heads point in the same direction, like something out of 1984. The people you called, asked Lion. Anyone mention Muad'Dib? Hector quoted from the collected sayings of Muad'Dib. He did, ask Lion. Do you remember which one? Give me a sec. I wrote it down in my moleskin. One of the ones I gave you, asked Lion, the notebooks were Lorenzo's birthday present last year. Have you become a convert? Completely. First class on the way over to Tokyo, which was a miracle. One of those private rooms and women in short skirts bringing me drinks in actual Waterford. Halfway through my second Walker Blue, I realized that somebody needs to turn Apocalypse Now into a blues opera. I filled a whole notebook. A blues opera? The horror blues. Groans. Which Muad'Dib sang. I'm still looking. Lion hears pages turning, cigarettes smoking, more pages. Got it. Greatness is a transitory experience. It is never consistent. It depends in part upon the myth-making imagination of humankind. Lion finishes the stanza. The person who experiences greatness must have a feeling for the myth he is in.
Wow! Congratulations that came through you. Holy shit, man. You covered in that Dune, Moleskin notebooks, and William Gibson, and made it an Apocalypse Now. And made it all work. You know, it's not just like you're grabbing cool shit, and it's like this is really an accomplishment, man. Cyber, this is great. But I wonder if you could tell me what that quote means to you. The person experiencing greatness must have a feeling for the myth he is in. What does that mean to you?
Well, I mean, on a simple level, right? Cultural context matters, right? And you got, at a really simple level, you just got to know what game you're playing at what particular time, right? And what's the right note and what's the wrong note? Let's totally take it out of this context, and let's just talk about it in comedy in a way that like we can deflate it of all. Okay. So Dave Chappelle, I'm just thinking about the 3 Netflix specials. The second one where he comes out and says, tells that joke and says, I've got this barrel of punchlines I write down, and I grab one out and I read it, and I decide that I'm going to integrate it into tonight's show. So the one I grabbed today says, and I punch her in the pussy, right?
Yes.
Which is the most insane. And then I punched her in the I mean, like, how do you even say that out loud, let alone get away with it? But he's David Chappelle, and he knows the myth that he's in. He's both David Chappelle, and he's David Chappelle inside the myth of David Chappelle, which has different outrageousness bounds than most other people's myths.
Right.
So Dave Chappelle can do that, right? If I go up on stage and I try to tell it, he punched her in a pussy joke, right? Like, I'm in the wrong myth.
Yeah.
That is certain. Like, it's just like, so that's a really like small, weird, not a grandiose level. But I think, one of the things, a lot of people talk these days a lot about, like, you hear these terms like cultural architecture, as if you could steer culture, if that was even possible. And I don't, I'm not actually sure that's possible, right? I'm much more of a Darwinianist. I think there's too much complexity and randomness in the system that you can even steer, and like, it doesn't go that way. But I do think that the people who have showed up and managed to make some level of significant, magnificent change, a Gandhi, a Martin Luther King, though that level of impact, they knew exactly how to play the game. And what they figured out, and the Rastas did this. There's a lot of Rastafarian stuff in Last Tango in cyberspace, right?
Yeah.
And one of the reasons is I'm interested in the question of how beliefs and religions get assembled. And the Rastafarian faith was built in plain sight over the past 100 years, where most religions were constructed out of sight. So you can't even see them. With the Rastas, you got to sort of watch it. But like their faith was a reaction to the worst kind of socio-political classism in Jamaica, right? They were at the bottom economic period in a very stratified class society where there was no way they were going to claim power from anyone.
Right.
So what did they do? They inverted the whole thing, and they said, we're going to make garbage sacred. We're going to take everything you've rejected, and we're going to turn that into heaven and say everything else is Babylon.
Yeah.
That was the myth they were in, right? They knew exactly what game they were playing and how to win, and it worked, right? They not only did that faith lift tons of people out of poverty, it actually managed to help split apart, shape Jamaica's class consciousness. It launched the punk movement. It launched the hip hop movement. It shaped so much global culture. But it started with somebody playing inside a very specific myth is what I was thinking about.
Whoa. Okay. That's cool. Wow. Yeah. And this, one of the things I love about this is that it happens. This is not bullshit. Like, this is one of the things our species definitely does, is from time to time, a bubble emerges that changes everything. At least in, it could either globally change everything, or certainly in countries, there's, I don't know, every country has these people who shifted it permanently. And so I love that, because that implies that in the same way prior to the discovery of electricity, there was still electricity. And similarly, in this very moment, we're always just teetering on the edge of another one of these people popping up. And except now they're going to pop up with the amplification of technology. When the Buddha gained realization, think how long it took for that meme
to spread.
Yeah.
To spread.
And that to me is these two things. This is like an electrical cord dangling over a puddle of water. Except we're all in the water, and it's just a matter of time before that son of a bitch drops. And when
I got a vision. Everybody in a bus and no brakes.
Yes, man. Everyone in a bus and no brakes. But I'll tell you, somebody's going to start driving the bus. And we all know that's coming. And so you hear this like over and over and over again in every religion. You've got the Maitreya. You've got the second coming of Christ. You've got in every world religion, there's this, it's coming. Another thing's coming. Somebody's coming down the pipes. And it's like, sure. What was that? Maybe they were smoking DMT out in the desert. Maybe it's just, the babbling of people from the antiquated, dusty past. But this same story is being told by technologists, it's the book you're writing right now, which is somebody's coming. You better get ready.
Well, yeah, so this was something we poked at in Stealing Fire, and this is really common, right? Like, people start having altered states of consciousness because the part of your brain that calculates time, right, that separates past from present from future, prefrontal cortex, is shut down.
Right.
So everything, you're plunged into the eternal present, the deep now, just the psychological term, but it has this feeling of immediacy, right? So this is a problem for, say, creatives, because a composer will get into flow and he'll have a vision of an opera and he'll think, oh, this is amazing. I'll be able to scratch it down and it'll be done in a couple of weeks, and it'll come back to reality. It takes fucking 10 years to write, right? Or it's Wagner's The Ring Cycle that takes 40 years to write the damn thing, kind of thing. So that is one problem for creatives, but it happens all the time with apocalyptic cults. People get in and they see something is coming and they think it means right now. And suddenly you're Daniel Pinchbeck writing Daniel's a smart guy, friend of mine, great writer. And then he wrote 2012 because he did a bunch of drugs in the jungle and violated rule 1, which is don't do a bunch of drugs in the jungle and decide the world is coming to an end, because it's probably not, right? Like, bad idea. Didn't work so well for Terrence McKenna, didn't work so well for Daniel Pinchbeck, and it's not working. It's not going to work well for the Silicon Valley dudes who are doing drugs at Burning Man going, oh my God, the AI apocalypse is not going to, no, probably not. Not so much.
Well, it is. Yep. You're talking about that rule is Robert Anton Wilson's rule, which is maintain agnosticism. You cannot get pulled in to the siren song of whichever it is, the DMT elves, the ayahuasca goddess, or whoever over there is telling you, get ready, strap in. Because if you do, it's innately embarrassing.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, like, I always tell people, and this is a rule with flow, and I mean, this from comedy, I'm sure. Don't trust the dopamine, right? Don't trust the dopamine. Don't, like, when you're high as a kite, right? You're in a deep flow state. Like, I tell people, don't go shopping in a flow state because you'll buy everything because it looks good. Yeah. Don't start, right? Don't trust the megalomania that comes with these states of consciousness. It's built in. Like, the ego goes away, and when it comes back ferocious. And it wants to say, oh my God, you're the only motherfucker who's ever had a vision. Yeah. You're the one who's right.
Yeah.
Not everybody. You're right. Really? Like, what are the odds?
Yeah, the odds are zero. the odds are you're having a manic episode. And it's time to like get some help, and that's okay. Yeah. I know plenty of people. To me, the manic episode that comes from these things, it's like some people get embarrassed by. I have more than a few friends who've gone in there, come back with a big message, very excited about it, and then that they were able to cool their brain down a little bit, and now they're fine. But it's just good to recognize that the odds of you being picked to transmit some, you're not Muad'Dib, all right? Just forget it. It's a relief, by the way. And also, that being said, though, we're all Muad'Dib. And this is a story that Ram Dass tells, which I love, which is his brother got committed. He was put in a mental asylum. And Ram Dass went to visit his brother. This is after he'd gotten back from India. This is Beard Ram Dass with the, he was doing the whole like ascetic, wandering Indian saint character. And his brother, they found him in an apartment surrounded by senior citizen women who all thought he was Jesus. And he had convinced them that he was Jesus. And so he said to Ram Dass, look at you. You dress like Jesus. You have a beard like Jesus. Why are you out there and I'm in here? And Ram Dass said, well, the reason you're in here and I'm out there is because you think you're the only Jesus, and I think everybody's Jesus. That's the difference.
That's pretty good.
It's cool. It's cool.
That's good.
And I have heard...
I don't normally hear a Ram Dass story you like. You're like, oh, wow, I really like this one.
He's great. You got to listen to more stories. There's some good ones. But there's another story. It's not a Ram Dass story, and I think it could be an urban myth because it's so incredibly unethical. But supposedly they took a bunch of people having this messianic fantasy that they're Jesus and put them together in a room to see what happens if you get 5 people who think they're Jesus in the same room with other Jesuses.
I read about that. No, I don't know who did this. I remember this experiment, and they couldn't believe it. They used to argue with one another, right? They couldn't. Yeah. Nobody would give up the throne, basically.
Everybody else is the imposter Jesus. They're all the devil. I'm the real Jesus. This is a bunch of bullshit. And so this, to me, is the...
Wait a minute. This is great reality television. Why hasn't the show been made?
Because it's...
This I would watch. This I would watch. I mean, I've never seen reality television, so I don't know. But like this, I'm the real Messiah.
Oh, God,
we
on
lock
Fox?
10 messiahs in a house and see what happens?
America's Top Jesus. Oh.
10 Jesuses enter. 1 Jesus come out.
It's the real Jesus. Oh, they have to do like contests, walking on water, the classics, but
raising the dead.
That's one of the problems. Is like one of them actually can raise the fucking dead, but the dead they're still sick or something. Like, you know what I mean? They can raise the dead, but they're still sick from rotting. But this to me is like when I think about like the sort of like perceived problem, like one of the problems right now is that we're experiencing something that's being called radicalization, which is that people are getting sucked into various like reality tunnels on the interwebs, and then the people and these reality tunnels are all distorted and warped and weird, and so then these people start getting the real sense that they need to be a hero. They need to be Jesus. They need to save the world. And so then these heroes go out and they do, we just saw what fucking happens. These people who think of themselves as doing something that had to be done, when in fact they just got pulled into a sick echo chamber with sort of exponentially amplified distortions of truth that led to them freaking the fuck out. And so to me, this is the problem, is that we have yet to realize that we're all if we're gonna do this, it needs to be more of a decentralized, mycelial Jesus, so to speak. A sum total game where we're all sort of converging together.
Rhizomal Jesus.
What's that?
Rhizomal Jesus.
Can you tell me? In the old days, I'd be like, I'd nod my head like I knew rhizomes.
Rhizomes are the structures that fungi networks put out. So they're you use mycelium, right? So I just went one level. I went down into the biology of the mycelium.
You're right. It's a rhizome, not mycelium. The mycelium is not. Yeah, we need a rhizomal Jesus, and that's when you think about it, that's, to me, if there is going to be another of these things that pops up, it's going to be a collective, because. I mean, I'm a little bit of a conspiracy theorist, and I imagine that if somebody did appear that was clearly too charismatic and somehow antithetical to whatever system is being supported by, folks who have a vested interest in keeping it going, that person is they're not going to last that long. They're going to be shut down pretty quick, I would think.
It's an interesting question. How do you keep that stuff down, and when it can go global so fast? What's interesting to me, there's two sides. There's two things that I think. One is on the proscriptive side, on like what's the problem. I think one of the problems, and it's sort of like the difference between kind of punk culture in the 90s, which was really like never beat your chest, and millennial culture, they at the Flow Research Collective, like the first rule is have a passion and purpose and keep it to your damn self.
Cool.
And I'm not interested. Millennial culture seems to like think somehow if you've got a passion or a purpose, like they lead with it. My name is Stacy and I'm here because I want to save the world. And, and I come from a generation like we care about execution. What have you actually done, right? And it's very easy to, once you sort of I have this passion, I have this purpose, and then I do this drug, and that combination together tends to produce that reaction. Right. When your value system is not the lip service you pay to your passion, but the actual thing you do in the frickin' world, that's what matters. It tends to the ego gets checked by the actual action that's required. So I think one thing is sort of worth pointing that out. And by the way, the other thing is just in general, high performance goal setting theory. Like there's really good evidence that says if you set high, hard goals and you'd like to accomplish them, keep them to yourself. Because the minute you say it out loud, your brain, you actually get dopamine from saying the high, hard goal that you want to accomplish out loud. So your brain goes, oh, you've already gotten the reward for accomplishing the thing that you were trying to do. So you have less motivation to do it. So first of all, if you actually mean your passion and purpose, keep it to your damn self, because you have a better chance of actually getting there. Basic psychology, high performance theory, the other thing is I think it tends to produce this kind of megalomania when you couple this passion and purpose value that millennial culture seems to have, and it's spread everywhere, spread in business. I get into business meetings, I'll get on the phone with somebody and they'll be like, my name is Michael and I'm a lawyer and I came out of Harvard and blah, blah, blah. And my passion is, and I'm like, the fuck are you telling me your passion for? I'm trying to do business with you. You're a fucking lawyer. I'm trying to hire you to do a contract. I don't care what your fucking passion is. I care if you can execute a goddamn contract. Fuck you. Right? I mean, I have to listen to this? Kill me now.
That. Yeah, the word's so good. Passion. Why are you calling it up? Don't even call it a passion. Come up with another word for it. Not a passion.
Do the thing. After you're done doing the thing, I'm going to pay the fucking attention.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's cool. No, see,
first, I think you have to discover relativity. Then you get to brag about discovering relativity. That's just sort of the way I was taught.
Well, yeah. This is that you were taught right. And the problem is this: people really can feel their potential, I think.
I agree with you. You
could feel it in you, and it's real, and you know it's real, even though you might be looking around at your life and it's just a wreck. You could feel this thing in you, and you know, holy shit, I could do this. The problem is the birthing process of getting that feeling out of you and into the world in a way that's consistent and creates some kind of change that is quantifiable. Can be a very long, painful, difficult, lonely process, and fucking boring too. this isn't a montage. This isn't like the movie where they play the pop music and the thing gets
Right?
done.
Exactly.
This is boring. It's like it's a grind sometimes. It sucks.
It's so funny. I was having a discussion. I don't remember where I was, but somebody asked me. I've got a class out right now called The Habit of Ferocity, and it's not built. I call it everything but the flow, and it sort of emerged out of this realization that peak performers do a bunch of stuff, motivation, grit, primarily stuff intuitively that sort of like most other people don't do. And somebody wanted to know, well, what is peak performance actually? What does it look like? And I was like, what is it? It looks like a checklist. Looks like you wake up in the morning, you got 10 things to do, and you get it all done, and you're proud. You gave every one you gave your best to, and then it looks like the same thing the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And the difference is that's what it looks like for years in a row. Like that's what peak performance, that's what best of the best looks like. It looks like a damn checklist where at the end of the day, you're like, did it again. Everything on my checklist is checked off, and tomorrow you do it again, and tomorrow, that's what it looks like. I mean, the things on the checklist may be sexier. You know what I mean? It may not be mop the floor. It may be, create a robot AI, or, they may be sexier things.
Yeah,
but
sure.
It's just a freaking checklist.
That's
right. This.
Yeah. And it's not, that's to me. Yeah, I do. But I think I had to sort of like give up a lot of conditioning.
Oh yeah. Totally. Like, that was like one of the hardest realizations for me. And they say this is one of the realizations you sort of make in your late 20s. Like there's an adult development transition stage between 27 and 30, where one of the things you realize is like your life is going to be nothing more or less than what you make of it.
Yeah.
Like you are actually driving the bus. And if you don't decide to like sit down and actually take responsibility for all of it and work hard, like it's not going to happen for nobody. The fairy tale doesn't happen. Every now and again, you end up with Brad Pitt's abs in Thelma and Louise. Like it happens, right? But it turns out even Brad Pitt, like he was smart enough to go, okay, look, I got great abs, so I got the part, but then I fucking busted my ass at that part and worked really hard after, right? The great abs may get you a break. You may get a lucky break once or twice, but it's all about, can you execute? And execution is, can you do the checklist today? Can you do it tomorrow? Can you do it the day after that? Can you do it when you're hungover and you're tired and you're fighting with your girlfriend? Can you do it when you have a broken arm?
Yeah.
Can you do it when you're in the hospital? Can you do it after they've stolen your favorite teddy bear? Right? Like that's that's what matters, right? Like,
that's how you do it. That's how, no, but here's the thing. Judge a tree by its fruit, as our Lord said. You have produced so much good stuff. It's not like you're spitting out crap, man. It's like you're prolific and you're just blasting. Oh, I guess I'll just write a legendary fucking cyberpunk sci-fi now.
And you liked it, by the way.
Yeah,
you liked it, huh?
What the fuck? Yeah. No, but this is to me like I don't know, it's like a lot of people who have a system that they claim can put a person, like can upshift a person's life. It's a weird thing when you look at what they've produced and you realize like, yeah, they wrote some books, but all the books are on the system of upshifting a life. You know what I mean? What else did you do? Where's the other stuff in there? Not that that's not enough, but man, you've like, this is so cool, because it's like, this is just.
And by the way, this was, so, my first book is a novel.
No, I do remember you telling me that, but I am not familiar with that one.
So nobody's familiar with it. And so it was a bestseller. And it has a very like devoted cult following, but let's be totally forthright and honest here. It's not a very good book. I did not have control of my craft. It was a big idea.
Yeah.
It's really cool. There's great stuff in it. It's not a great book. And then I wrote 2 more books that are sitting in drawers, 2 novels. And then I went, okay, you know what? I don't have the skill. I don't have the craft. I can't do this. And I switched to nonfiction, wrote nonfiction for 8 books. And so like when I came back to Last Tango, was something to prove, right? Because I had sort of gotten I hadn't been able to do this thing. Right. So I really wanted to get it right. And I also, I wanted to write a fun cyberpunk thriller, Neil Gaiman, William Gibson kind of, because those dudes weren't like, most of them stopped writing them. right? Gibson was writing, but we would get a book every 5 years, and which is too slow for me. I like his shit too much. And the other guys, Stevenson went into hard science fiction. He's 100 years in the future. He's in outer space. Neil Gaiman wrote Neverwhere, which was sort of on the straddle line, and now he's doing straight up fantasy. And like, I'm not interested in Norse god science fiction, and I'm not interested in 300 years from now in a galaxy far, far away. I'm curious. But I was always, what I liked about those guys is they gave me a look at the world 5 years from now, 7 years from now. Like, what am I living into? And, you know, Blade Runner was an incredibly useful movie for my entire generation because it let us know what we were living into. And we're still living into that. Though I always point out that the Blade Runner was set in 2019. So I don't think LA is going to look like Blade Runner LA, but I think Tokyo might actually look like Blade Runner LA.
Well, I'll take the flying fucking cars. I'll tell you that, man. You can't get around LA anymore. It's done. It's over. I just ride a bike.
Flying. By the way, that's opening chapter of the new book I'm writing with Peter Diamandis is set at the Uber Flying Car Conference. Uber Flying Car, autonomous taxis in LA by 2023 is what I'm planning on launching.
Thank God. Thank God. It's crazy. I can get I'm not allowed. Damn it, I have to keep saying this. I'm not allowed to talk about it. I can get to work. It's like, you know, I can get to work not like 8 miles away from my house on my bike faster than in my car. And that's nuts to me. That's insane that I can do that. That's crazy.
Well, I left LA. The main reason I was in LA was the surfing. And when I started to realize that, like, I took the wrong turn or went at the wrong hour, and I was like, it could take me 4 hours to get home from Malibu. And I was just like, I can't, like, this is not okay. Like, this, nobody should live like this.
All that time, man, all that time is just getting sucked up. And
the other thing is this, like, in the field of positive psychology, we've advanced to the point that, like, there's some things we can say for sure. Like, the data's in, we're solid on this. And one of them is one of the biggest hits quality of life takes is traffic. There's there's reams of data that says we don't deal well with being stuck in traffic. It's not good for us. And there's your podcasts, right? Or audiobooks are the best fix anybody's gotten for it. And it's a good fix, right? If you're stuck in traffic, those are fantastic. And I love it because it means that I've got this great LA market for audiobooks. It's fantastic. God bless Gridlock. I appreciate it. But no, I mean, like, you know, it's a quality of life hit.
No shit, man. And this is you could sit in your car and listen to audiobooks, which I used to do, but it's like you're stuck in a metal bubble surrounded by miserable people, all at varying degrees of awareness that something seems to have gone completely off kilter in our culture, that this is even happening. Most of them know I didn't need to go to where I went. I could have done it at my house. Why did I go there? It's like we're doing that thing like in the Dawn. This is a very weird reference. Dawn of the Dead. All the zombies are wandering through the shopping mall. Some of them are like trying to play hockey. Some of them are, it's obviously not about zombies, that movie. It's about consumer culture and the hypnotic trance a lot of us have gotten into. But one of them was looking at the zombies, one of the survivors, and is like, they're just doing what they were familiar with. And it seems like historically, something happened where we had to go to offices. We had to be together. There was no phone. There was no way to instantly communicate like this. And so we all gather together in these fucking offices, and then we do shit that we could have done at home. And the price of that, I guess, inhaling each other's goddamn pheromones, is that the fucking ice caps are melting. Because we want to breathe each other's farts. We want to breathe each other's post-lunch farts in these offices. So it's a little bit of a mess, and this is why I'm encouraged by the advancements that are happening in technology. And I wonder if you could tell me which, and I don't want to turn you into Nostradamus here, but in this book, which of these technologies do you think we're the most likely to see first? Without giving
so everything in Last Tango, and I say this in the acknowledgments at the very end, either exists in a lab or is right now. So everything in the book is actually real at some level, with the exception of there's a pharmacological compound at the center of the book. That's the only one that stretches the bounds. But everything else, in fact, some of the stuff I made up, for example, there's the one scene, there's a character flying on an airplane, and there's a VR app where the camera's mounted on the hood of the airplane, and you can watch. So from between the time I wrote that and now, that already exists.
Wow.
So
cool.
like 3 or 4 of the things that I put in there came into the one that's the weirdest, and the one that is coming and doesn't yet. It's in the book. So is the face reading aquarium, where it's it's in certain foreign countries. As you enter the country, you walk through a tube that's an aquarium, right? And what they're doing is they're using computer face reading, and they're face reading you. And you can't, when you have lots of things, live things to pay attention to, you can't mask your facial expressions. So it's literally, they're using life as a anti-lying detection mechanism.
What?
And they're building these. Yeah. So that technology, that's real. Those will start showing up at airports over the next 5 years too. You're going to walk through like aquarium tunnels so the computers can read your face accurately.
That is fucking nuts. So wait.
Yeah, that's kind of fun.
When you have a bunch of like variables out there you have to pay attention to, and you have a lie simultaneously, the lie like flickers out.
Yeah, you have to. Your attention gets distracted, right? Because so one of the things it's sort of everywhere in the book is we come with all these built-in proof of life detectors, right? The first thing any organization wants to know is like, are you alive? Are you dead? Right? That's the first thing when you encounter anything in the world, it's, are you alive? Are you dead? The next question is, if you're alive, right, are you like me or not like me? Because if you're like me, I may want to fuck you, right? And if you're not like me, I may want to run away from you, or I may want to kill you and eat you.
Okay.
Right? Like those are the choices,
Yes.
right? So, but the first thing we have to do is, are you alive or you're not alive? So we have all these things that are built-in automatic proof of life detectors that happen automatically. And we don't even think about it. And the easy example from technology is when it goes wrong. So in robotics, there's something called the uncanny valley.
Yes.
If you have a robot, right, that is almost but not quite human, that almost but not quite brings up a sense of disgust in us. We don't, like, it's too close and not quite. So we have a reaction. We're detecting a fake. It's a proof of life detector. Yeah. One of the things that happened in the book to me, and the opening scene takes place in the United wing of the new Newark airport. And I flew into Newark one night. It was like Friday night at like 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. And I got off the plane, and the airport felt like there was a party going on. It was like filled with people and energy and what was it? And I realized as I walked off the plane into it that it wasn't. It was actually Friday night, 11:30, but everything blinked and scrolled and was liquid and moved. And movement tricks the proof of life detector. And so I got tricked into believing that this airport was actually filled with people and alive and going on. And it wasn't. It was just designed to do that, right? It's designed to make me feel the sensation of life, even when life's not there, right? And so think about, this is in Last Tango. We think about, we do this sometimes with like, think about a party, right? When everybody leaves and goes home and you're left, if you manage to stay sober, that empty house it gives off a sensation. Absence of life feels like something.
Yeah.
Presence of life, right? There's sensations. We know what those sensations are.
Sad.
We don't have, right? It's sad. It feels like you can feel right? Like, so there's something that I think what it is our mirror neuron systems, when there's life around, we're always mirroring. And when there's nothing to mirror, we notice this lack of things to mirror. That's what I think. I think that's the biology that's the biology I play with in the book. But I think there's so one of the questions where this gets weird is people always talk about the line is going to be, when does an AI wake up?
Yeah.
Maybe that's an interesting line, but there's going to become a point where we no longer, the Siri story I told you, where you can't tell, is it awake? Is it not awake?
Right.
Which is a different thing than is it awake? Right. But like where we can no longer tell, when the cars are autonomous and they're making decisions, there's a point at which you're like, I don't know anymore. And I don't know anymore. We've never lived in a world where the things we make could become conscious. That's not happened before other than by sex, right? The only way we can make something that wakes up is through sex. Every other way it doesn't wake up. And that's going to start to change in terms of how it feels. The texture of reality, the fabric is going to shift in weird ways. And that's one of the things I'm trying to like get at in Last Tango in cyberspace is that the feeling. I'll give you an example from your own life. And so if you, maybe the error is wrong, but like the world felt one way before the internet showed up.
That's right.
Right. It was much more localized. It was smaller. And suddenly the internet happens, which is, this is where William Gibson's cyberspace, the term, comes from. He's talking about not the actual web of connections between people. He's talking about the mental feeling of suddenly, oh my God, I'm now connected to the world in a way that I've never been before. And that connection has a feeling. The phenomenological texture of reality is different post-internet than it was pre-internet because they're connected, right? That's going to shift again in like 5 years, right? Like reality didn't feel the way it did 20 years ago and it shifted, but like technology is moving so quickly, that's going to shift again in 5 years and then in 4 years and then in 3 years. So we're going to go through these phases where the way life feels, what sort of like gives us our concrete anchor to reality sense is going to start shifting faster and faster and faster.
And this, I think, if there is a redemption for the people who got pulled into the fucking 2012 thing, this is it. Because what do you know? The prediction for Quetzalcoatl returning in 2012, it was actually pretty good when you consider the fact that the universe we're existing in now, as you just described it, is at least subjectively completely different from the one when I used to have to memorize friends' phone numbers in Hendersonville, North Carolina, pre-internet. And this world that we're in now is so very different. You could almost say that old world died. It's gone. It was sort of liquefied, got restructured, however you want to put it. And that's the world that we're living in now. And this is another thing that happens to our species is that our shared realities dramatically shift from time to time throughout history. But usually in between these shifts, we have a long time to get used to it, to integrate it.
Long periods of stability. Yeah, long periods of stability. Punctuated equilibrium, right? To use the evolutionary term.
Okay.
Right? Long periods of stability, cool. Big period, big unstable period, long period of stability. Ray Kurzweil has said, and head of engineering at Google, right, runs their AI department and wrote The Singularity is Near and has been very good at predicting patterns in the future. And what he has said is we're going to experience 20,000 years worth of technological change over the next 100 years.
Yes.
So to put that in context, it means we're going to go birth of agriculture to the Industrial Revolution twice in 86 years. Now, he could be off by a factor of 1,000, and it's still going to be faster than anything we've ever possibly experienced.
Yes.
And the reality shifts, like the reality tunnels, to use Wilson's word, that we're going to experience just over the course of our lifetime. If you get another 30, 40, 50 years out of this game, are going to be massive, right? Like our life totally changed in and around the mid 90s in a way that, I try to explain to people before the internet, culture was disseminated in this thing called magazines. Like now you think that this thing at the airport that you see and you're supposed to read them on the plane if you're bored, right?
Yes.
You can't get your phone to work. No, it turns out those used to be the major engine for disseminating culture. I remember when Interview Magazine showed up in Ohio. And Interview Magazine was this magazine that was created by like it came out of like Andy Warhol and the Kitchen Crowd. And it was like New York's art culture from the 70s and 80s, and it like made it to Cleveland, Ohio, where I was, and it was like our first glimpse of like, oh my God, there's this other thing out there in the world that they're doing that sort of resonates with what we're doing. And it was that the idea that magazines were once for a long period of time, they were once the disseminator of cutting edge culture. It's such a weird thing for people to wrap their heads around.
Fuck, Matt. You just brought back the memory of the time at this gas station, they got a magazine rack in Fletcher, North Carolina, and it had all these fucking skater magazines. And you couldn't and it was like...
The first time you saw a Thrasher or something like that, and you were like, holy crap, There are other dudes like me.
Yeah. There's yes, and that was almost like it's like a little mini cultural UFO landing, and the ripples that would happen in the microsystem of high schools just based on the sudden availability of this new cultural sort of representation of what people are doing in other places. It really creates these micro changes that are that lead to big things. And yeah, so now we're getting that all the time. And now, and what's happening is there's fragmentation, wouldn't you say? There's some kind of like schisming that seems to be happening, which is we're getting these like cultures that are forming, that are based in cyberspace, but that are so vastly different from each other. And then those cultures are splitting, and those are splitting, and those are splitting.
One of the things, so at the heart of Last Tango, right, is this idea of polytribes, right? Like,
yes.
And the idea here is, and the first one I ever saw, it's on the first page of the book. I talk about the Pokemon subculture, and you probably actually thought I was joking. You probably didn't realize this was a real thing. So the Pokemon subculture existed for a tiny little window in the early 2000s in Chile, and very conservative Southern Catholic Chile. And it was the first global mashup subculture. So what happened, right? The internet made subculture visible. So suddenly, instead of like culture coming in through magazines and whatnot, every subculture was visible. So you started to get mix and match subcultures. So the Pokemon subculture blended Japanese Gairu makeup with West Coast hip hop gear, East Coast emo style haircuts. They had these Brit punk sneer attitudes, crazy bisexual tendencies, and they rebelled by wet kissing strangers on the street. So
I thought you made that up. What?
No, it's totally true. And the government freaked out, and they basically stomped out this subculture very quickly. They sort of got like white supremacists pissed off at them and stomped them out. It's one of the first times I've ever seen a government actually extinguish a subculture. They found it so threatening. They buried it very, very quickly.
That's nuts.
But I was down there. I was doing a story. I was doing a magazine article. I wanted to see, there's a lot of environmental stuff in Last Tango. I obviously care deeply about that stuff. And I wanted to see climate change for myself. So I went to see the icebergs melting, right, in Patagonia. And you
found out the Earth's flat and it's not really happening.
You could say I had a flat Earth joke for you. Hold on. I had it for a second. It was funny. Somebody told it to me last week. No, it's not coming to me. I got nothing. Sorry, I tried. It'll pop up later in the conversation. I'll be, that's the joke.
So you went to see I'm sorry for interjecting a dumb flat Earth joke. You went to see the.
I went to see. Yeah, I wanted to actually go see what climate change looked like up close. I wanted to feel it. I wanted to see if I could feel it. But while I was down there in Coyhaique, this like town right at the edge of Patagonia, I was bumping into this Pokemon subculture, and I was like, oh my God, like remote southern Chile, you're literally like as far down on the earth as you can possibly get, and you've got crazy mix and match subculture where they're pulling out of like all the major cities, and it's this mashup thing, and we're going to get more and more of that. And the reason it's interesting to me is if historically, innovation never happens in the center of a system, right? In nature, you call it niche creation. We move innovation to the edge. A forest fire burns down, a forest, and then you can it creates a new niche, and then you'll get niche creation. In culture, we call it subculture. In businesses don't innovate in the center of business.
Okay.
They innovate in skunk works, right?
Gotcha.
Because the center of anything is built for stability. It's really hard to innovate in the center of anything. It's built for stability and security. And right, culture goes to the edges. So if you want to track where culture is going, right? Even though, as I said earlier, it's Darwinian, there's no way to make predictions.
Sure.
You can at least see where the trend lines are going and intersecting. And you want to look at subculture, because that's where culture is innovating. That's what's happening. So you're seeing now in subculture, right, these crazy mashup cultures. And now me and you were talking about the Pokemon culture, and it's crazy. And it's this weird thing, right? But you got to start realizing like this is going to be the mainstream, right? These kinds of mashup subcultures are going to start becoming what happens in the mainstream. We're going to get globally mashed up mainstream culture for the very first time in history.
Wow.
Soon, right?
I
Like
love
we're moving
it.
in that direction. And that's interesting. That's interesting.
Well, it's also, I'll tell you this. This is one of the things that's really interesting about it is that we know this is a field. Basically, you're talking about a field of data that is kind of difficult to collect. I've heard like big fashion companies will go into these subcultures on purpose to try to like figure out what trends are happening so they could plan their next seasons or the seasons coming. But, you know, when you consider the I don't know if you listen to Sebadoh. Do you ever listen to Sebadoh? You ever listen to any lo-fi, Daniel Johnston? Like that's like one of my great musical inspirations. But this movement happened in somebody's like mom's house, you know, as they were like slowly unraveling, but their music made its way out there. And like, it's Sebadoh, Lou Barlow. This stuff was happening in front of 4-Tracks in Boston in like the shadows, you know, and you couldn't gather that data at the time. But now with the tracking that's happening just by looking at people's searches, you have a deeper way into these subcultures than ever before, meaning that there is a way to harvest data and literally, like theoretically, not literally, theoretically, you could harvest these fields of data and perhaps an AI could construct a fairly accurate prediction of how these various subcultures are going to mix together to form these polytribes. And to me, that's wonderful, but also a little
spooky, right?
Spooky, because what you just said happened to me, what sounds like pretty much, I mean, I don't want to get a wet kiss necessarily from somebody, but on the other hand, it's not going to be the worst day ever. It's interesting.
You got to give them credit for creativity, right? Because every generation tries to out-rebel the previous generation. And the bar's pretty high at this point. Like, what do you that you've gone from like long hair and weird clothes to tattoos,
face
to
tattoos,
body modification, right? And now we're starting to see implants, technological implants in counterculture. So like the cyborg movement is starting to happen a little bit with that stuff. So like it's hard to rebel. Wet kissing strangers on the streets, I give them propers. I'm like, okay, that like I can see how that would freak the fuck people out.
It's cool. It's awful. It's cool. But I'll tell you, to me, the thing that is nerve-wracking about it is not that. So what? I don't care about being tracked. I've given up any sense of privacy.
Oh, right.
I mostly, not any sense. I still shut the windows. But the fact that subculture got snuffed out by the state or wherever the fuck they were, like that, shows you one of the dangers, which is that if we could track these emergent forms, these potentially culturally shifting tides, and we don't want one to show up because it's like, oh shit, look at that. That's like, we've got to.
That's really interesting.
It's called, there's a name. I just saw this New York Times. I think it was the New York Times. This lady got into one of these Russian troll farms because she was curious about how they work. So she got into one where everyone's sitting at the computers making memes and shit. And one of the things they do is when there's an idea they don't like, they had a name for it, a squelching or something, where they would just go to these, whenever that idea pops up, they throw up memes that reflect the state's ideas, but made accessible. And then it's designed to sort of like snuff out a fire that's about to start. And so that's a new kind of war that's happening, which is like when these little forest fires start breaking out in various cultures that could potentially threaten the power structure of the culture, then infiltrators pretending to be the subculture that they're wanting to stop go in and snuff it out or shit disturb to shut it down. So this is like
that is crazy. That's it's way more frightening than anything I wrote about in Last Tango, maybe. Wow. That's really creepy. And it does where it's going to get interesting, right, is this is just the first wave, right? You're seeing, right? The internet's allowed a new kind of rebellion, and they figured out how to control it from within, and it's just going to be another arms race, which is interesting, right? Because the arms race that we have played out in culture, as you pointed out, has been very slow moving. Now we're playing very, very quickly. I mean, like the ways that this is going to go wrong, it's just unfathomable.
It's
how wrong this could go.
Well, this is the I think one of the subcultures that is the most interesting to me is the maybe Jaron Lanier subculture, which is the folks who've turned their phones off. And who are out in the who have created these sort of technology-free enclaves, these little vacuums of technology within which we don't know what they're doing, untrackable, unseatable. Because it's one of the principles in psychology that corporations love is that people remember the fact but forget where the fact came from. So if you're scanning through Twitter and you see a fact, you'll forget it. You got it from Twitter. And if it's stuck in your brain, so to speak, you might find yourself walking down the street having a conversation and you'll sneeze that data bit out. And it got planted in your head by somebody who intentionally wanted to create a spread of that data going out there, which is why we don't know what seeds are getting stuck in the furry little carapace of our brains, what little data seeds are stuck in there that we're planting in other people's brains. And some people are like, we just don't know. So we're not going to go through the place where we risk being contaminated by bad data. Anyway,
I always think about that. So I always, when I train writers, especially people writing books, everybody, you really want your book to be I wrote the book that changed the world. And I always tell people, I'm like, look, I've gone through that 10 times. You think it's going to be the book and you want it to be, and it feels right. And don't listen to the dopamine. But my moral is, I'm like, look, unless we're talking about your favorite 3 books, if I were to throw out a book you've read, chances are all you're going to remember are 1 to 3 facts and how it made you feel. That's all. Like in the end, right? Like in the end, even with somebody I always say, if somebody comes up to me and they're like, Stephen, blah, blah, blah is my favorite book. Like what they're really saying to me is, instead of remembering 3 facts from your book and how it made me feel, I remember 7 or 12. Like that's really what they're saying to you. Oh, right? That's cool. Which is, right? I mean, if you think about it, like when you say, this is my favorite movie, what do you really mean? You mean I can tell you what it's about. I can probably recite 12 to 15 lines, and I know how it makes you feel. Yeah, that's what you're saying. Books are like it really like sort of manages to shrink your ego around like the impact your art is actually having.
Oh, what a relief! Thank you for that liberation, man. What a relief. It's because it's a fucking prison. Like people who are trying to do that, and your ego creeps in, and sure as shit, you're like, I want to write. I don't know. When you start, for me, it's like you would call it insanity, which is that I'll sit down and try to write something, and I'll look at it and I'll think, well, this is no Hemingway, and then I'll give it up. It's like, what the fuck? My ego is like, wants me to be Hemingway. One of the great writers that ever lived. It's like, seriously?
But I mean, I like that. And you can't, I mean, you could give Hemingway a go. You just gotta edit it 40, 50, 60, 70, That's 80, right. 90, 100 times. And then we can start moving you in that general direction.
Now, listen, I know you got to go. It's 12:13 right now. I don't know what your schedule's like, and I've kept you over.
I don't have anything for a little bit, so we can keep talking.
Awesome. Okay.
I'm with you.
Okay, wonderful.
This is I was just talking to another friend, my friend Mark Twite, who also has a podcast, and my 2 favorite podcasts are you and Mark Twite, because you're guys who are you're kind of got the same kind of punk rock weirdo background, so I get to just be totally me.
Thank you. That means a lot to me. Thank you very much. I do want to spend the last little bit of time using your brain to, if possible, to sort of get into this world of writing, because selfishly, I'm constantly working on a book, and I'm constantly quitting working on
You're Los Angeles, right?
Yes.
Are you in town the second week in July?
Yeah. I can already say that I am for sure.
My next Flow for Writers is in LA in July.
Okay.
And it's a 2-day. You come as my guest.
Oh my God. Thank you, man.
My guest.
What is the date? I'm putting it in right now. Tell me the date again, please.
I
got it. Second week of July. That is the
second weekend. Hold on. Let
12th,
me just
13th, and 14th. I got it. I'm putting it in right now. Great.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's awesome.
Exactly.
Well, then
14th.
that I will definitely be there.
So there's your problem. And by the way, send you the URL. I'll give any of your listeners have writing aspirations. They want a 2-day deep dive. We'll give them $500 off.
Oh, awesome, man.
I'll send you the link and you can put it out when you put this out.
Cool, man. Let me just say this because I want to put this out there. Not that you care, Stephen, but this was spontaneous, friends. It wasn't some pre-planned weird thing. That's awesome.
Oh yeah, by the way, this was totally okay.
Yeah.
Secretly, we connived how I could sell more tickets to Flow for Writers. We were talking about this backstage, and
this is badass. And thank you very much. That is a huge and beautiful gift, and I will definitely.
We could. There's a discussion we could have after that class because everything.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you, you're going to get in 2 days. You'll like it. You'll have a lot of fun.
The other funny thing that I think is that you just said, I tell students, don't get it out of your head that you're going to write the book or the big thing. And then you did it. Ha! You wrote it, man. You made a fucking great cyberpunk book. And I'll tell you, people try to imitate this style and they can't fucking do it. Because if you're going to write this kind of book, you can't just sit down and make up snazzy catchphrases. You can't pretend that you have your finger deep in the subcultures that are happening around the planet right now. You actually have to know what's happening in a creepy way so that the book feels almost like you're reading something you're not supposed to be reading. That's the punk rock aspect of it, which is wait a minute, this shit is real. So for me, the fact that you didn't, when I was starting it, I thought, oh yeah, I know this was inspired at an airport because he travels a bunch and I know this must have just popped into his head in an airport. So I got that. But then when I got
actually, I'll tell you this. No, the story's funnier. It was airports, right? I told you that story where I was just so there's an environmental message, right? And so I wrote a book called A Small Furry Prayer about the relationship between humans and animals. And it had an environmental message at its heart, sort of. And the book did very well, but I always felt like the only people who read it were already animal geeks and environmentalists.
Right.
It spread a little bit, but it was basically I was preaching to the choir. So I had said to myself, how do I solve this problem? How do I sort of get the same ideas out, but to a wide audience? And I had been thinking about that on and off for a couple of 6 months or whatever. True story. Abundance comes out. Peter Diamandis, my co-author on Abundance, and I are doing radio tours. We're in New York. We're in Bob Hariri, one of the pioneers of stem cells. We're in his penthouse freaking apartment.
Cool.
Peter's in one room, I'm in the other. We've got phones, and we're literally doing a radio interview every 15 minutes.
Crazy.
From 4 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, right? And at 5 o'clock, I am losing my fucking mind. I can't take it. And I'm if I don't get outside and smoke a joint and get stoned, I have to something, right? I can't know enough sales and marketing, Stephen, for one day ever. Right. And so I run outside and it's raining and I'm literally smoking a joint, walking down the street in the rain. And an image pops into my head of a human head mounted on a plaque of amid animal heads, right, on a taxidermy wall, right, and there's a human head amid all the animal heads. Now you'll know from reading the book that's the opening scene in the book. That's essentially the opening scene in the book, right? That's the protagonist has that encounter. So literally, I saw that. I knew it was the answer to my question. Whatever the way to communicate the animal thing, this is the answer. I had no idea what the story was. It took me 8 years to figure out how that goddamn head got on the wall. And the answer is Last Tango in cyberspace. This is the answer, right?
Wow.
But literally, I had the question, I got the answer, and I was like, okay, well, that's the answer. but like what do I do with it? It took me 8 years to figure out how did that head get on the wall, and the answer is what is the story?
Wow,
in a weird way, weird story.
That is badass. And this is something, you know, I read a lot about the writing process, and that's sad. I wish I wrote more as much as I read about the writing process. But, you know, Stephen King, he talks about like the Dark Tower, you know, how that came to him in an airplane, and he sketched it out. And then you just looked at it, I was like, oh, put it in a drawer. And then down the line, it spawns this whole series. And I guess that's part of it, right? Is having the guts to write down that stuff. Because some people that vision might bubble into their minds, and they're like, "Wow, I must be going nuts."
I think it's also that people are very impatient with that stuff. Meaning, like the vision, the idea, whatever it is, comes to them, and it feels really strong, right? The intuition,
yes.
Which is sort of like I spent a lot of time working on intuition and looking at the neuroscience of it, and like how does the goal-directed system work over time, right? How do I get a glimpse of something as an artist that doesn't turn into a real thing 10 years out? And I think the important thing is to know that like the thing that you got, the vision that you got, it's just you've got to do the work. You have to keep feeding it over, and you can't put a time frame on it. And we know this from lots of creativity research and intuition research, that some of these things you don't want to put a time frame around it. You just want to keep feeding it a little bit at a time and a little bit at a time, and you just sort of come back to it, because the way the brain puzzle solves through those problems, you can't condense it, and it doesn't work well if you put a time horizon.
How do you sync that up with the concept of setting goals?
Well, I have book projects lined up that go out 5 or 6 years, right? And 5 or 6 years out, I'm like, okay, I may have a topic, or I may have, I want to write a book about intuition and neuroscience and whatever. And all I do is I'm just reading and researching. So every third book or fifth book is something that might fit in there. And I'm just feeding my pattern recognition system a little bit of information over time, slowly, because that's how the brain does this kind of puzzle solving. So this is really cool. There's a special, when your brain has a problem it can't yet solve, it holds that problem in a special holding cell. It's unlike other memory. Other memory can get splintered off, and you may not get access to it for years and years and years. But if it's an unsolved problem, the brain has it in a special holding cell where all the connections to all potential solutions are really right at the surface, which means if you'd ever discover anything, that you've all had the experience where you're reading something and the information clicks in with something you learned a while ago,
yes.
right? And you're like, oh my God, it's the thing that answers the thing, right? That's because that stuff is held in a special holding cell in the brain, so you can do that. Right. There's an actual, I'm going to screw the name up. They have a specific name for that process. I'm going to screw up what it is. But the point is, if you know that's how the brain works, you want to feed it. You want to feed your curiosities slowly and consistently over long periods of time, and let them, you know what I mean? Give them the space to become real ideas. I think what the problem that most people have, especially creatives, is they want the big idea, but they're unwilling to do the actual research and have the patience, right? Last Tango in cyberspace, I knew I wanted to write another novel 20 years ago. I knew I wanted to write a book that solved this puzzle. That was 2011 when I saw that, right? Or 2012, excuse me, when I saw that, right? It's 2018. It was 5.5 years that I was just sort of like feeding it little bits of information and saying, okay, let's take this a little bit farther and a little bit farther and a little bit farther, and not trying to solve it all at once and not trying to rush it into existence.
Wow.
But also the advantage of having a long career, right? Like a lot of people, this is another thing that artists, like this is along with the, oh my God, this is the best book I've ever written, anybody's ever written, right? That syndrome, right?
Yeah.
Is like, that's not honestly the goal. Like the goal isn't to write one book or do one comedy special or record one CD. Like it's to have a career.
Right.
So one thing is going to have to lead to the next, is going to have to lead to the next, is going to, like, you're going to need stuff at every bit of the way, right? The creative lives that impress me now are guys like Stuart Brand or Brian Eno, or guys who have reinvented themselves at a really high level 6, 7, 8, 9 times, right? And they're still doing great work, incredibly powerful work. And they've, that's what it takes to have a full creative career. And that's what I'm really interested in.
Wow.
I don't who the fuck wants to be a one-hit wonder?
Nobody.
Back when I was a journalist, we always used to, every now and again, especially some of the magazines I was writing at in LA, we were always curious. We would go back and hang out with rock stars who were no longer rock stars. Like a lot of the hair band guys who they were packing stadiums in the 80s. And by the late 90s, they were house painters. Yeah. Right. They it lost everything and they were fucking house painters.
Yeah.
And I was fascinated by what must it feel like to there's 25,000 people and women are throwing their panties at you to now you got an apartment and you're painting houses for a living. And that to me, and I'm not even talking about the adulation, the fame part. That's ultimately uninteresting as you know, but the not being able to be creative for a living, that's got to really freaking hurt to me.
How does that happen? I'm sorry to this is the thing though. To me, it's okay, I've thought about this. I've thought if the apocalypse comes and there's nothing but shit, water and rubble everywhere, I'm still going to try to make stuff. Right? How do you stop? To me,
I don't know how to stop either. And I always that to me, I was talking to somebody else asked me this question the other day and I explained, I was you got to understand that I'm a creative. So what I care about is the next creative project. What happens when a book comes out, what people's reaction to it. I care in that I want it to be good because it allows me to do the next thing. It makes doing the next thing easier. Yeah. But honest to God, once my editor is okay, you're good, we're done, we're going to press. Okay, now I've got a checklist that is PR that I have to put into place. But I'm done. I'm already on to the next. I don't care. Yeah. The thing I wanted to do, people always come up to me and they're like, "Oh my God, your book changed my life. Thanks." And I'm like, "Shut up." I was you got to remember, I'm writing this book to save my life. The fact that it happened to save your life, that's totally incidental to me. That was not what I was that's not what I'm doing. It's great. And I appreciate it. And I'm glad. But I write this stuff because I'm trying to save my life. That's whose life I'm trying to save with the art, not yours.
Man, I love talking to you, Stephen. You are a really, really, really inspirational person, whether you like it or not. And you are changing.
I don't like it.
I know you don't. And a lot of my favorite creators, they are like that. And it could be a little frustrating until you realize why. Because some people who are legendary musicians that I have been lucky enough to chat with, the moment I start doing that fucking thing of your music, they tune out. They don't want to hear it. They don't care. They literally don't care. They can't care. And I like that.
And I honestly think it's the same thing that I just talked about. It's that, so I'll tell you a true story. The one time somebody came up to me, I'll never forget this. I was in Italy at a business conference at the World Business Forum or something. And I was doing a book signing. And it was one of those really weird, I didn't even know I had fans in Italy. I didn't even know anybody, maybe my books have been translated into Italian, but I'm doing a reading and there are 500 people who have lined up for me to sign books. And I'm I don't none of it's making any sense to me. My head's having a really hard time. And there's this girl, teenager at the back of the line. And I see it and she's crying. And I see her getting closer and she's crying and closer. And I'm oh God, this is weird enough. And what the fuck? And she gets up to me and I'm all right, why are you crying? And she looks at me and she's 17, 18. And she was you got me through high school.
Wow.
And for the very first time, because writers got me through high school. So that's the first time anybody's come up and said something to me where I felt it, right? Where I was oh I know what that feels like. So normally when you come up to me and, when you say anything like that, I'm really incredibly grateful that you got something out of the book, but what you got out, you brought to the book.
Wow.
I wrote it. You did something else with it, and that's the thing you're reacting to. So we were a good combination, and it helped you, and that's great. But like the thing you're talking about it's not really my thing. I did my thing. It was to save my life. You took what I did, you added a whole bunch of your stuff into it, and it saved your life, and that's cool. But it's not. I didn't do that, and don't give me credit for that. That was as much you as me. And if it wasn't my book, it would probably be some other book that did that thing. And I'm pretty sure of that. But this was a girl who said something to me where I was like, fuck, I know that feeling. So it resonated. And I think the problem is that if it doesn't resonate, like if you don't happen to hit that one chord, the artist is already on to the next thing. And they don't want to. And it's a trap, as you know. Like I remember West of Jesus, which was my second book. When I was done writing that book, I was like, oh my God, this is the best book I've ever written. I'm never going to write anything this good. I had that problem. And you know what it created? Fucking writer's block. It took me like 8 months to get my next book going.
Yes.
Because the last one was so good. How could I write it? Right. It's a fucking disaster. So Stephen's rule is I start writing the next project the 2 weeks before the last project ends. So I'm working on a book right now with Peter Diamandis. I will start my next book 2 weeks before the one with Peter is done.
Yes.
So I can already be into the next thing by the time I finish this one and long before it comes out.
Do you like Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche? Do you read his work at all?
Gesundheit.
Okay. You're going to love this guy, Chogyam Trungpa. He's amazing. And his whole theory is based on this, and it infuriates some people because the guy who I study meditation with, I went to him and I was like, man, I had a transcendent experience meditating. And he's like, really? Well, tell me about it. What was it? And then it's this process of deconstructing the experience to the point where you realize, oh yeah, that was bullshit. That was nothing. But every time I've been sitting to meditate, that experience has been pulling me because I want to replicate it, duplicate it, make it happen again. And so the advice, and it's like it's one of the traps. And so you see this with artists, which is that they're like, I could never redo that thing I did. And the reason that they're stuck is because they're subscribing to a concept of the continuity of self. They think they're the same person they were when they wrote that fucking book.
But that's the other problem, right?
Yeah. That person's long gone. It's dead. That person's dead. Whoever you are now needs to be writing or creating from where you are now, not writing from the voice of a person who's been annihilated.
Well, that's why, by the way, Duncan, I've got 2 novels sitting in drawers. Like each of them needs an edit. But I don't even know who the dude was who wrote those books. Right. Let alone trying to find them. You know what I mean? Like at a certain point, you got to walk. You're totally right.
And that's the difference between
nothing fixed about the self.
And to me, that's the difference between a Jedi and a Sith. If you want to use Star Wars like terminology, or what Aleister Crowley called the Black Lodge, which is in magic, the people who turn into like dark sorcerers, and what that looks like in the real world is just like people who use NLP to trick women into fucking them or whatever, like that kind of like self-centered like use of like technology to like without it to dehumanize people. But
wait a minute, hold on. Are you saying that we're not supposed to use the NLP to fuck women?
You got to tell them first. As long as you let them know you're using neurolinguistic programs. You can't do it.
I just want to know what I didn't know what the rules were. I've been married forever. I don't get to do this stuff anymore. But I just want to know where right and wrong is, just in case.
Okay. I hear you there. Do whatever you want. Do as thou wilt, as Crowley said. But there is a black law.
No, I get your point on all those things.
And you are not in that, because I've noticed in my experience with comedians and artists that if you want to create an imaginary binary, you could say there is a group of artists who feel that they are responsible for what's coming out of them. They are what's coming out of them. And when people come to them and say, you changed my life, they go, yes, I know I did. I know I changed your life. That's right. And these people are the ones who become the cult leaders. They're the ones who become the center of some sad vortex of sycophants who are imagining that this is the conduit through which life and art flows. And the sorcerer in the middle of that is projecting that, and this produces centralization and lots of problems. So it's awesome to hear that you're not one of those.
This is always, there are authors, they're going to go unnamed, but if their first book and their 8th book or 5th book sound the same, I know they're in it for something other than the craft.
Wow.
They found something that works and it's making them money. And maybe they're in it for the ideas. Maybe the craft itself doesn't matter and they're actually just, the writing is a way to explore the ideas. Maybe that's fine. But as a general rule, like, I want to see a style evolve, right? I want to see a comedian, a musician. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. Neil Young had a shocking pink rockabilly phase in the middle of his career.
Yeah.
It was okay.
Yeah.
What you know what I mean? Like, a lot of people do that stuff, but I want to see that the art is evolving, not because when you see, it's like when they're trying the same thing over and over and over again, they're listening to the dopamine. Those are the people who are, yes, I changed your life. Right? Like, and I have to do that again and again. No, I'd rather roll the dice. I'd rather, right? This is written in a radically different style than anything I've ever written. Right? It's a new thing. And I think, like, I mean, who knows? Maybe this style will particularly work and I'm going to write the same book over and over and again 10 times. And there are other authors.
Yeah.
No, that's not true. I think all of my favorite authors, even if like they're just thriller writers, John Samford, who's a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist who became a novelist, started out writing these like horrific slasher serial killer things because they sold a lot. But once he figured out what he was doing, he invented some of the most interesting characters in mystery and, you know, has fleshed that and has really grown. Those are careers I look at and go, that's interesting because you're continuing to grow as an artist and take chances and scare yourself and do something like that's really interesting because where I'm interested in seeing is like, there's so much wisdom that you get as you get older, right?
Yes.
But we lock people in and suddenly you've got Mick Jagger and he's trying to do Mick Jagger at age 75 and it just looks like a 75-year-old dude in tight pants. And you're like, what this? You can't sing it. Do something different. Reinvent yourself, right? Tom Waits did, right? His music got harder and more complicated and weirder the older he got.
That's right. I'm sorry to do this to you. You just changed my life. This is one of the most liberating chats I've had, man. And you accidentally the prison cell in my brain with the unsolved problem, it just opened up. So now I'm having to trust the dopamine. Thank you so much, Stephen, for this. And I cannot wait for that workshop. And please tell the folks listening how they can connect with you now.
StephenKotler.com is the easiest place. www.StephenKotler.com. You can get Last Tango in Cyberspace comes out when? In May, and you can pre-order it anywhere, and you should pre-order 17, 18, 19 copies, really.
You give them out
because nothing says Happy July 4th or Merry Christmas or Happy Easter. Or what else do we want? What's coming up? I need something.
Spring equinox. Bicycle day when they discovered LSD.
What? LSD. Happy Bicycle Day. Nothing says Happy Bicycle Day like Last Tango in Cyberspace. So, you should buy copies for everybody you know.
That's right.
In fact, strangers. You should buy copies for strangers.
Let me be cheesy here, though. For real. This is a very good book. And as you could tell, Stephen is an amazing person. And if you do these pre-orders, it makes a difference in the way the publishers treat the book, I heard, right? It does make a big difference.
It does. And by the way, we'll get you a link for this too. It hasn't launched yet. I don't know what, but we are doing a really kind of cool pre-order campaign where we're giving away nothing super fancy, but I did an hour-long conversation with Peter Diamandis on future technology, all the future tech in Last Tango. We sort of went category by category and talked about what's real, where it's going. And you'll get that. You'll also get a 2 to 3 hour, I don't know how long we're going to do it, podcast. So I've worked with the same editor for 25 years.
Cool.
And so we're going to just we're going to have a 2-hour discussion about the writing of Last Tango and mostly about the writing process and the book writing process and all that stuff we were talking about. So pre-order the book. we'll get you a link so we can hook people up with that, and they can get some free goodies as well.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I really appreciate it.
Brother, thank you. It was so fun.
That was Stephen Kotler. Everybody, all the links you need to find Mr. Kotler are going to be at duncantrussell.com, including the links to get those awesome discounts he mentioned on the show. If you like the podcast, please don't forget to like us and subscribe. And subscribe to the idea that there is an infinite ocean of love surrounding you at all times and that you don't need to worry about ever running out. I'll see you next week. Until then, Hare Krishna. Oh, and much thanks to Squarespace and Robin.